Hi, I'm Sean Krankel. I am the studio director of Night School Studio, and we're here at PAX East showing Afterparty. So Afterparty is a game about two friends who have died and gone to hell, and they don't know why. They've been best friends their whole lives, and we uncover over the course of the game what the mystery is of their death. But it turns out that there's a loophole in hell that nobody's ever done this before, but if you can outdrink Satan, he will grant you re-entry to Earth. So the game quickly becomes about partying in hell with demons and awful people and trying to get into Satan's house party to drink him under the table. Afterparty is a narrative-driven game. It's everything that we do at Night School is really based on taking storytelling but making the toy of the game actual story mechanics. So it's not about playing some other mechanic and then watching a story sequence. Rather, we want the communication to be sort of the mechanic for the player. So you play as Milo and Lola, two characters that if you don't decide to talk, they won't talk. There's no cutscenes. It's just a free-flowing sort of experience where you make your way through this comedic adventure in one night. In Afterparty, the player's main objective is to just get the hell out of hell, but we also have, I think there's a sort of subtext that's happening throughout, which is that it also is an exploration of friendship, and so Milo and Lola, because they've been friends for so long, have a lot of baggage, and a lot of that baggage kind of gets dug up through the course of this game. So even though it's a comedy and an adventure and it has a lot of dangerous situations, we also go back into their history and uncover that. So it's a bit of both. It's about friendship, but it's also about getting out of hell alive. Few people. I mean, we kind of, ultimately I think we were making this game for ourselves because we think it's hilarious and ridiculous and funny. But if you played our previous game, Oxenfree, which was more of a coming-of-age supernatural story, I think a lot of fans of that or anything in the sort of narrative genre would appreciate it. But it's also for fans of like Rick and Morty or The Simpsons or Beetlejuice or Superbad, any of those movies that are these kind of crazy nights out. Also, the Edgar Wright films were a big inspiration for the game. This game, honestly, it's sort of sad, but I just liked bars in games. I thought they were a funny setting. I spend too much time in the bar in Red Dead. I spend too much time hanging out in taverns in Skyrim. And I'm like, why aren't people doing anything in these bars? They're just standing around. So we wanted to make a game literally about that. And then after we knew we wanted to make this bar game, we wanted an antagonist that would be really cool to go up against. And for like 2 months, we couldn't figure it out. And then Adam, the co-founder of the studio, and I decided one day, wouldn't it be funny if it was Satan? And they were like, it's stupid. And then a week later, we're like, no, that's pretty cool. So that's how it all came together. Pretty ridiculous. I think we've been inspired by both movies and games the same, right? Like I think on the game side, obviously all the sort of classic LucasArts games and then into Telltale became sort of a bedrock for how we would treat communication. But all the games we've made so far, we look to other genres or other medium really like to develop it. So like early on we said we wanted to make a playable Edgar Wright party movie, basically. And we wanted to do a playable Superbad. We wanted to do a playable Bill and Ted. Like how can we give players a lot of agency in a story that is a crazy night out that feels like, very unexpected. And so we kind of took a lot of the bones from what we did in Oxenfree and thought, how do we blow that out of the water? How do we make the scope a lot bigger, but make a playable comedy adventure that happens to have a little bit of sci-fi elements too. I moved out to LA a long time ago on an internship working on a really shitty soap opera called Sunset Beach. That ended and I started working at Disney Feature Animation. I was a recording coordinator on Bug's Life and a bunch of other movies when I was still like a teenager, and then left there, went into video game development at Universal Interactive. There I worked on a few Crash Bandicoot games, also 50 Cent Bulletproof, which is a very weird experience that I'll tell you about another time. And went back to Disney, worked on a game called Where's My Water, which is like sort of a puzzle game that was on mobile a few years ago. And then, this past 4 years ago, started with my cousin, started this studio. So the main sort of thrust of that was to get Oxenfree out the door. I played the hell out of Zelda, Day of the Tentacle, Maniac Mansion, every Mario game. Yeah, I'm kind of a Nintendo fanboy. And then that sort of bled into the PlayStation era. I kind of play everything, to be honest. I'm not really like a genre snob. I play pretty much everything. Red Dead 1. I mean, 2 is probably better, but Red Dead 1 holds a special place in my heart. God of War. God, they're all so recent. All right, let's go back. Ocarina of Time, Super Mario World. Oh man, I'm missing so many. Oh, Rez. Rez is definitely up there. Yes, Rez. So at night school on site, we have 13 people, and that's a mix of artists, writers, designers, developers. Who am I forgetting? Engineers, developers, I said that. And then we sort of scale up and down with specific needs, so we might have to have a few designers come on site to hook up a lot of content. So right now we're actually closer to 23 people, but that's crazy, that's very temporary, that's like another month. The core team is really about 12, 13 people. We started working on Afterparty about 7 or 8 months after finishing Oxenfree. So that's about 2 years ago, basically. We had worked on a larger game in the interim, and that ended up being something that we didn't want to move forward with. So we kind of burned it all down and said, like, what's a thing that we can make, we can control creatively, we can own, and Afterparty came out of that. Afterparty is built in C++ and Unity, and then we also use things like Maya and a few other off-the-shelf tools. And then inside of that, our lead developer built a lot of custom tools for how the scripting works and how the dialogue system works. So that's called Night Tools. That's the thing we actually want to release on the Unity Asset Store at some point in the future, but we're still kind of building it as we go. Yeah, I mean, Slack is a super useful piece of our development from a communication perspective, because a few of our folks are off-site, they're not in our studio. But we also use, we use Git and SourceTree, a lot of sort of the standard stuff that people would use to build out games. Jira has been something that we were not using enough before, that we now use Jira and Confluence, because as our team size has grown, communication has gotten more fluid, which is also a little bit too messy. So we're trying to really rein that in. We went from 4 people when we built Oxenfree up to 13 people plus like 10 more contractors now. So it's a lot bigger endeavor for a team of our size. So Confluence and Jira in particular are like really vital for how we communicate. Extremely difficult, and surprisingly more difficult than Oxenfree, which I thought we would have had a little bit smoother sailing. And I think that was primarily because everything just expanded more in this. Like in Oxenfree, you had 2 to 4 characters on screen. In this game, you have 30, 40 characters on screen. In Oxenfree, we had a cast of 5 people. In this, we have 100 characters. We have like 25 actors. The art style is totally different. It's all 3D art now, whereas Oxenfree was flat. So the game was a lot harder, and it was more, like we made more mistakes, but we like learned from those mistakes fast and tried to pivot a lot. So that was another key thing. Yes, oh my God. But we also made like more mistakes. I don't know, it's crazy. Like we learned about scaling ourselves, I think, a lot. I think there were a lot of things that happened on Oxenfree because it was so small that it was just very organic. It was easy for us to communicate and ensure the vision was solid. But as the scope of this game grew, it's difficult to ensure everybody like has the same shared vision. So I think we've like really just become a more professional studio. We're a real studio now, like we have walls. We didn't have walls before. And we have actual little departments. And so we've just learned how to grow as a team and how to not take on too much, basically. One time we went on a research pub crawl out in Venice Beach. We're riding bikes around, we're riding e-bikes. By the end of the day, we were all wasted. Our art director had sand in his eye and he had an open wound on his leg. So that's not that crazy. It was fairly crazy, but could have gotten crazier. That's probably the craziest. Everything we do, we try to look at the rest of the market and go, how can we be different or try something new? And so in the case of Oxenfree, which was our last game, it was all about looking at narrative-driven games which were really relying on cutscenes and us going, no, let's remove cutscenes. Like, let's always let players control the story. In the case of Afterparty, we just came up with the most outlandish, ridiculous story we could think of and wanted players to have a great time inside of that. So I don't know, I haven't seen any other games about drinking in hell yet. Our game isn't necessarily trying to make a statement. We pretty quickly decided to acknowledge or assume that all religions are like right, so that we could equally make fun of everything. And so we're not really making statements so much as just trying to let people have a good time for a few hours and run around with their friends. Afterparty is packed with Easter eggs. Oxenfree was also a game that had a lot of secret endings and mysteries and things you could dig into, and that was something that we found we wanted to do more of in Afterparty. So in the case of this game, a lot of the game you end up missing on your first playthrough because you might have to, if you get a call that there's a cool party going on at 10 o'clock in one place, then you're going to miss out on a scene that's in another place. And you really can't 100% that like the first time through, because it should feel like a rollicking, weird night out with your friends where you just kind of see where the night takes you. And I think, whereas in Oxenfree, dialogue choices were the main way that we pushed and pulled at the story, this is also about where you are and when you're there and who you're with. Yeah, this is my first time at PAX. This is most of the team's first time at PAX, and it's been amazing because usually we just show, like, these events are usually like we're doing interviews with the press, and the press inherently asks a lot of similar questions and has a very similar tone. But getting to interact with gamers and see what they're liking, what they're not liking, I mean, it's awesome. We've seen a couple of Alexes in cosplay come by today. Alex was the main character from our last game, and it's so exciting because our whole community interaction usually is just online. So I love meeting people and knowing what they like and don't like and discussing, getting the game in their hands further. You can go to nightschoolstudio.com to check out a lot more on Afterparty and Oxenfree. Thanks for watching, and thanks to PAX and Indie Megabooth for having us. It's been incredible. If you want to find out more about Afterparty or Night School Studio in general, you can find us on Twitter, on Discord, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Tumblr.